Hello there and welcome to Travels with Geordie. If this is your first visit, my name is Peter Knowles and I live on this Edwin Monk designed classic wooden motor cruiser here in Victoria, British Columbia, all the while working on it for some pretty ambitious cruising someday. If that's the sort of thing you might find interesting, please consider sticking around and subscribing. I'd love to have you. Goodness, it does get a little tight in the yard here sometimes. Anyway, so what are we up to today? Yes, back in the bilge. It seems I live in that bilge. Anyway, working my way aft and working on installing more of the floors I've already made, more butt blocks, and more abandoning old through hull. Anyway, you'll see, you'll see. And good morning, folks. Well, as happy as I am with the way these two went, I'm just thrilled, actually. I'm unhappy with my little panic here, having to remove this promptly because I didn't go to the trouble of measuring the depth of this through hull before I put it in. But because it was already embedded with the sealant starting to harden, I had to proceed. Now, I had actually clamped it down with the nut and collar. But what I've decided to do, you can see a ring I've drawn on the block. I do have 3/4 of an inch to play with here. So I'm going to cut out a dado, or a little section of this, so I have some strength. I have some, expanded strength in this area. However, the nut will have to drop down slightly into that, but I think it's still worth doing. Now I just have to figure out how I'm going to cut this. I'm probably going to freehand route it, I think. Some of you will remember the scarfing jig router I set up for the scarfing jig. I kind of wanted to leave this set up in case I needed to do any scarfing. Well, I'm well past having to do that, so I'm going to take this apart. Of course, I'll save all the bits and turn this back into a trim router for some work to do here. Okay, I make no claim here. I actually hate freehand routing. I'd love to set up a jig for this, but I think this will just have to do. There's almost nothing to see through here because that's the nature of freehand routing, trim routers. Okay. I'm gonna call that fine. I have a little dimple over here, but holy mackerel, Peter, that will have to do. Just ease that edge just a hair. And now that drops in there nicely. Plenty of room to grab it with the wrench and or a socket if I ever had one. Some oil. Redo the bedding. And down it goes. As soon as I saw that, I said, I can't have that. It's going to create a little well for water. Never going to get this boat afloat. There we go. And I'll put the blanking plug in for now so I don't have any wires to trip over. Expensive NMEA 2000 wires. And if this goes down as I suspect, I should have about 3/16 of an inch clearance between this nut and that nut, which is about exactly what I do. Yes! Oh, this isn't very comfortable. Okay, so let's make another butt block right here. Right then. Perfect. Okay. Perfect. Okay, now make it pretty.
Okay, I'm just putting the first screw in as soon as I drill it because it's sitting in that bedding. It's gonna be squirrely, and I want to make sure I drill all the holes in the same spot. Ah, see it move? Now I know I can drill all the rest safely. Okay, now ladies and gentlemen, if you think there's any chance of that bung coming either in or out, I object. Bolts are through. I can only get 4 bolts in this one, but there's also 6 screws, so I'm not the least bit worried about what's going on here. I think I used my 3.5s here. Oh well, no harm. Okay, and it's time to bolt down these flanges. Now I know I'm going to get objections about this, but I think I've already mentioned that I don't believe there's any reason to through bolt these. It just creates more weakness and holes in the hull than we need. All I really need is to get it solid to this block, and for that I'm going to use these nice big 5/16 lags. Now these are galvanized. I actually looked for bronze lags. No hope, at least not quickly. So this is what I'm doing. There we go. Bulletproof. Okay, as we're moving forward to aft, let's start actually mounting some of these floors. What the? Oh, I'm not changing it now because that's a perfectly secure butt block, but I kind of flubbed that. All I had to do was trim a little. Anyway. It's an incredibly secure butt block. I'm not worried about it. Okay, so gotta start to fit these. Time to drill a big hole. Now I'm not Leo. Let's see how I did. That's within tolerance. As I've said, I've reconsidered bedding these, but for a different reason than you might think. As if you remember, it's really just to even out the pressure points in the loading, and I think there's some value in that. And so what I'm going to do is partially bolt this down until the 291 is partially hardened, and then pull it down the rest of the way to get a real good uniform clamping action. Okie dokie, let's swing it around. Okay. There we go. I'm gonna pilot for the bolt. And a nice long 1/2 inch galvanized lag bolt. That's all that can do. Oh yeah. On such a hot day. Okay, as they say, that's not going anywhere. And yesterday I had oiled the hidden sides of this. Now we can finish up with the exposed sides. There we go, that's better. Let's try not to get it all over everything here. Oh, you poor thing, I won't hurt you too much. Oh, that's it. Yeah! Oh, yeah. And another bung block to go in. So I'm gonna goop this up quite well around that. It's been oiled. and centered right like that. And oil on top. All right, well, this has all been fun, but it's just about to get a little more complicated. Can you see that dot of light right there and the corresponding one over here? Well, that's a butt seam right there. So another complex over the top bit of puzzle work. I think it'll be okay. It'll be fun. Okay, that part's easy. Now I gotta account for this little bit of the frame coming up. And cut a little notch in the back to clear the frame. Nice little chamfers up front. And that makes a pretty nice little butt block. I just have to temporarily fasten it so that I can put some screws in from behind. Okay, let's get some bolts in there. So the next bay, port side, pretty straightforward, nothing to it. Starboard side, we have an abandoned through hull, which I've yet to sand and fare down. And up here we have a butt block, but it's a nice, straight, regular one with no frame in, so that's easy to deal with.
And just another quick FAQ. You know, I say FAQ, frequently asked questions, but sometimes I'm answering questions that are only asked by one person, but sometimes I think it's relevant enough to answer them. Someone asked about this big box under the swim grid. It's a live well, I believe. There's a stainless steel hatch above anyway. This whole fiberglass swim grid has got to go, but not soon. So that's what that is. I could keep my wine in it or something. Okay, so let's carry on. Someone mentioned I'm not using green oak, proper steaming oak, and well, I assure you I am. At great expense, I purchased green steaming oak clear, so it is definitely steaming oak. They also questioned whether or not I was actually steaming it correctly. Perhaps it could have been steamed hotter, but I didn't have any trouble, so it seemed fine to me. 291 won't stick to oiled wood. Yes, and that's by design. Bedding the floors and butt blocks and stuff like that, I don't actually want to adhere them to the inside of the hull. I simply want to create a cushion that will uniform or at least level out all the high spots and pressure points. So in fact, by oiling the wood that goes down on it immediately before doing it, I guarantee that it won't actually stick and it can slide and move against it. It's more of a custom fit gasket, if you would. I don't think there's any real advantage to trying to completely seal bed, like butter it all over the surface of the wood, but there'll be people that object to that. Why not using tung oil for all the work in the bilge? A couple of reasons. One, it's about 10 times the price of linseed oil, and two, I don't think there's any real reason, because linseed oil is not a bad oil, it's just not very good if it gets a lot of UV. In other words, it goes black, but in the bilge that won't happen. Someone pointed out that the little wood wedges that I'm going to put in, they actually appear down in here. I only mentioned them briefly because I've actually decided to do them afterwards, which I can easily do once the boat is back together and I'm afloat. I shouldn't be making them, or I should be sealing them somehow, because those wood wedges will rot, and that's probably true, although the boat is full of them already because that's the way the boat was built originally. I have, however, decided to make them out of the same black plastic, ultra high molecular weight plastic that I'm making all the plastic filler frames in, just because it's actually easier to get them to conform into that space, so that'll solve the rot problem. Someone asked if I attach my butt blocks to more than one frame. In other words, if there's a butt block here, if it's also screwed to that frame, and well, let's say one below, it could put stress on the butt block and the fasteners if I did that. Well, actually, exactly for that reason, I only ever attach the butt block to one frame. However, it is larger than that frame, so it actually has some surface area in behind the next plank as well. Someone asked about expansion of the floors when they get wet versus the fasteners. Well, wood expands largely across the grain, very little with the grain. So if you imagine the floors, the length of them, in fact the direction that they would rack their fasteners, they will move very, very little. Now you might say, okay, well the planks are expanding with the grain or against the grain. However, I haven't fastened the planks to the floors yet, and that's for precisely that reason. I'm hoping my new trick of soaking them is going to get to the point that they're in exactly the right place, and then I'll shoot all those screws in. Did I actually just make a sound? Sorry about that. Very good point. A few people mentioned that the transducer needs to be vertical. Aha! The classy, super high-tech Airmar transducer that I purchased, an NMEA 2000 version, absolutely does not require that. It's one of the specific features of it. It has a very, very wide cone, and it can be put in up to 22 degrees, and I think I'm in at around 12. So anyway, it absolutely does not need to be vertical. I thought it did, and I was prepared to make fairing blocks for it. No need to put the divot in for the seacocks because, well, someone said, why did you bother with those divots? Because you were able to put the seacocks in and not need it. Well, they're there in case I need to take them out again, or some poor sucker in the future does, because you're not going to have to remove the floor just to get the seacocks back out. And can you believe it? People are still debating the direction of the bungs. Just go back and watch some prior FAQs or episodes or whatever. Sorry, the bungs are all in and they're all big on the inside, and that's the way it's going to be. Anyway, see you tomorrow. Okay, the concept of the post-its on the bulkhead is actually really working for me, although I'm changing the way I think about it a little bit. You'll see I'm not taking post-its off every day. Well, that's because I'm not getting the work done because it's taking longer. This time I'm working in the bilge on bung, restoring the through hulls bungs and butt blocks and putting the frames in. It's taking significantly longer than I'd hoped. So what I'm doing is not taking them off until they're done, so that this now shows me how many more days I'm going to have to be here. Of course, I don't know what I'm doing on these days, although I'm pretty sure I can say that the tanks are going to take at least a full day now that I'm doing a full install. When I first imagined I was coming here, I was going to go back to the marina on jerry cans again and do that work back at the marina. Now I have to do it here because whether I join the classic yacht station cruise or not, I am going cruising directly from here. So anyway, what are we at? 14 post-its back on here, so I'm probably 14 more days on the heart, but more on that later. See you tomorrow.